And hello everyone, welcome to PaintCast tonight. Glad to be here and glad to have you guys here. My name is Ashton, the bearded painter behind the brush, and I'm glad you guys are here. Thanks for being here. And hello everyone, welcome to PaintCast tonight. And I need to turn the volume down on my stream because otherwise I'm going to have a horrible volume loop, so I apologize for that. So, glad to be back, guys. We had some technical problems last week with family stuff, and then, of course, the horrible storms running here through southeast Idaho, which tend to happen, and made for a little bit of an inconsistent week last week. So, we're back on track this week, and we're getting stuff done, so thanks for bearing with me. Appreciate that. Give you guys a little bit of an update on some stuff that's going on. For those of you that are interested in the Donate or Paint Challenge from Chain Attack and the Cephalix Army that is being painted for that. Just show you guys some of the how some of the pieces are progressing and how some of them are looking. There's one of the heavies right there. He is about 90% done at this point. I just need to get his weapons attached and get the helmet attached and pick up a couple of highlights, and he's going to be done. Here's the completed version of the other one, what they look like. So give you guys a look on that. I thought this was actually a nice little detail, by the way, the little dial that he's got going on his chest there. It kind of goes from green, yellow to red, so kind of like a boiler gauge. Got a lot of the drudges done. Show some of those to you guys here. This unit's pretty much all done. I don't think I have room to get all of them in on the camera, so there'll just be a couple of them here. The only thing left to do on these guys is just paint the rim and get them sealed up and ready to go. But all the OSL is done on them, and then the highlighting and whatnot is done on them. Couple of the solos that I've been working on. I don't know. Well, these aren't solos. This is actually 2 men of a 3-man unit, and they're getting pretty close to being done. So a lot of stuff is wrapping up on this army, and I'm hoping I can have it done by lock and load. I was even thinking maybe I could take it to lock and load with me to show to you guys when for those of you that will be there. Maybe do some demo games with it and such, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that. The entry that I'm working on for lock and load, my personal entry, is taking up a lot of my time, and I just don't know if it's going to happen or not. So but I'll keep you guys posted for those of you that are willing to are interested in donating on that one or getting that happening. So anyway, tonight what we got going here, I am going to be finishing up Issyra, however you say her name, from Retribution, the latest Retribution caster. She is about 90% done, 80% done. So what we'll be working on tonight is the brown cloak, and then also her face as well. So those will kind of be the two areas that I'll be focusing on with her, and hoping to get that model done tonight, which means next week for PaintCast, Imperatus will be what I'll be working on next, and that should be a pretty cool project to have going. So keep you guys' eyes open on that one. As far as Cricks, we will be working on more of Eric's Cricks tonight. Denny is just about done, and I just wanted to have show up with some wrapping up of some details with her tonight. And then Asphyxius is just about done, so I probably won't even really go over the two of them tonight, just because there's so few details on there left to do. I don't want to waste time on that on air. I want to get going on Deathjack, so I'll probably be working on him mostly tonight. And then we'll see how the night's going when we get to that point, and either I will wrap it up for the evening after that, or get some work done on Bradagus. So we'll see how it goes. But for those of you who were not watching last week, this is where we left off with Issyra, and let me just adjust my camera here just a little more so you guys can have a little more, get a little bit better color there. There we go. Her armor, gray armor, is just about done. The orange on the plate here is just about done, as well as the orange trim and sash surrounding the cloak. What I'm going to work on tonight is, Anthony, I'm going to show you how to do some of the glowing effect here on the shoulders, also on that big gem there right around her collar. Same on the back of the hand there, and it looks like there's also small gems here on the knees. And then also on the cloak here, on her tabard. What we have to worry about here is you've got two very similar shades of orange going on. Well, not similar shades of orange, but two different types of oranges going on. This is definitely more of a brown orange on the cloak, and this is definitely more of a bright orange. And right now, I don't think it's that they necessarily clash, but I want to sell this brown color as being more of a leather color. And right now, I just don't think that's happening yet. So we're going to play with that a little bit and see if we can get that to happen. So that's probably where we'll start. So we'll get right into it here. And what I want to start with on the leather here is we've got this, like I said, this nice brown color here. We've got some nice shading that we already built in, and some nice highlighting that we already built in with the airbrush. So the next step that we're going to want to take, Anthony, is probably to do a couple of thin glazes, I'm thinking, on the brown. And for that, we're going to go to my old standby here, Umbral Umber, and just mix a little bit of that up. For those of you in chat, Grammar Cowboy, that's Anthony. This is his mini. So Anthony, if you got any questions while I'm doing this, make sure and pop those into chat. Just keep in mind that there is about a 30 to 40 second delay, and when you're asking those questions. So get that Umbral Umber onto your wet palette. Thin it out a bit. You don't need a lot for this part. You're just doing a couple of glazes, just kind of changing the overall, not changing the overall color, but just modulating or altering the color slightly. And since we want to push this more towards a brown, that's why I went with the Umbral Umber. In the model building, in the armor model building world, the AFV world, the guys that build like the 135 scale modeling kits and stuff, this type of a thing would be called what's called a filter. It's also in photography. You can put a colored lens over, or a colored screen over your lens as you're doing some photography. It could have a slight green hue to it, or it can have a slight blue hue to it, and it can help just change the overall color and feel of a picture or a model very subtly. That's kind of like what we're doing here. It's just kind of like a filter. We're just going to just modulate this color just a little bit, kick it a little more towards the browns so that it takes a little bit of that orange edge off of it. When you're applying these types of coats, it's really important to make sure that the paint does not pool too much. What I mean by pool is pooling. You don't want it to settle too much in any one spot, or any cracks or anything like that, because you're not trying to do a wash necessarily. You're just trying to alter that color just a touch. Okay, that's pretty good there. And you can already see how that kind of toned that orange down just a little bit, just with that initial coat. Really can see it a lot actually on that front cloak right there. So we'll probably add just one more coat here. Again, this is This is just a very thinned out glaze. You're probably doing about a 1 to 10 ratio of paint to water here. It's pretty thin. Okay, and while we're waiting for that to dry, because we want to stay in the blues a little bit, we're going to take some coal black now, and we're going to paint the leggings that she has right here in coal black. Excuse me, I was off camera there. These leggings right here, we're going to paint those in coal black, all right, because we want to stay with that complementing those two complementary colors, the blue and the orange. We want those two colors to work off of one another there. So a little bit of the coal black on your wet palette. So in how this is going to apply to your overall paint scheme, Anthony, is when you're painting a mini and you've got, you know, some miscellaneous type pieces of cloth, an area that you're not sure what color it can be, or it should be, this coal black would probably be a good color for you to default to, as far as painting those kind of obscure random areas. I've said it before on these paint casts, when in doubt, paint it brown. You're not going to want to follow that advice with this. When in doubt, paint it coal black. That's what you're going to want to do. Okay. Now that that's dried, though our filter coats have dried here, what we want to do now is start working some shadows into our paint scheme. Let me just adjust something real quick with my camera here, guys. Take just a second. There we go. Okay. Just kind of had to move that out of my way a little bit there. So so here's what we got here. We're going to take the two colors that we actually have on our palette right now, the coal black and the umber, and as I've done before, or showed before, we're going to mix that into a nice dark brown color, and then we're going to do a little bit of two-brush blending here to kind of darken these shadows up just a little more. And what I'm doing here, as far as where I'm applying these shadows, is I'm using the airbrushing that we did initially as kind of a map for where the shadows and the highlights need to go. There's a lot of our shadow already in place there. See how that looks. And now we want to do a little bit of maybe start working a little bit of your highlight in here now. And then as far as those highlights go, we're going to start pushing a little bit towards the yellow. When I painted my my circle army, I used this bloodstone color quite a bit for leathers, and I really started to like it. And what I was highlighting the bloodstone with was rucksack tan, actually, and it was creating a really nice nice highlight color for the leather. And I think it will do the same thing here. So we're going to put some of that on the wet palette here, and keep your dot of rucksack tan and keep your drop of the bloodstone separate, because you're going to kind of mix a couple of different shades of the highlight. Okay, so what you want to do is start with about a 2 to 1, 3 to 1 ratio of rucksack tan and the bloodstone. Let's see what that looks like there. Okay, and make sure it's got a little bit of water to it, so it's glazed a little bit. And we're going to kind of use that same layering technique that we used on the gray armor as well. And we're just going to start adding in these highlights there. Okay. And this is going to bring back a little bit of that original base color that we had on here that we kind of modulated off a little bit. But that's okay, because we're going to actually be pushing past that color as far as the highlight goes. I don't want to do too much on the back there because I haven't even done the shading on the back yet. So I'm going to steer clear of that for a minute. And I'm just kind of glazing this on, as you can see there. For these kind of first layers of highlight, they don't need to be too clean. Now you want to make a mixture of your rucksack tan and blood tracker, but do it about 1 to 1. 1 part rucksack tan, 1 part bloodstone. And make sure this mixture is a little thinner than the one before. And go back over the same spots again, but just come in a little tighter. So, if last time you covered 90% of the area, stick to about 75% of the area this time. Alright, and then now make yourself about a 3 to 1 mixture of rucksack tan and bloodstone. So about 3 parts rucksack tan and about 1 part bloodstone. And keep this mixture fairly thin as well. And you can see how light that is. We're getting really close to pure rucksack tan here, which is good. Just want that a little thinner. And again, now pull your highlights in even closer. So you went from 90% of the area down to 75% of the area. Now you're doing a little less than half of the area. Okay. I'm glad you're liking it, man. Glad you're liking it. Anthony was just commenting on chat how much he liked the scheme. So now for the last part here, take pure rucksack tan, and you're going to want to thin this down pretty good, okay, for this initial part. Almost as thin as you had the umbral umber when you were doing that first part of filtering or color modulation. And you want to kind of, particularly over the highlight area, pull that color over a fairly large amount of the area, and then kind of just soft blend it in, wet blend that in there. And this just is going to kind of tie the whole highlight together and give the whole highlight a little bit more of a yellow hue, a leathery hue, and that's going to pull it away from more of the orange. And so there's the front of her cloak there. Nice leathery color. Looks pretty good. So on the back here, a lot of this is already in shadow right in here. So I'm just going to deepen that shadow in a couple spots. Again, I'm just using the original airbrushing that I did as kind of a map for where I'm going to put a couple of these shadow colors here real quick. And you're probably not going to need to put a lot of, when you have areas that are heavily shaded like this, Anthony, you're probably not going to need to put a lot of highlighting back here. Okay. I'm going to add another dark shadow right over here, just kind of separating these two spots. A little bit of black lining. Okay. So as far as highlighting the back goes now, go back to your original first highlight layer of about 2 parts blood tracker to the 1 part of rucksack, and just kind of get the tip of these highlight areas here. Okay, it's looking all right. Pull this color up a little more in here. Okay. Alright, that's coming along. The cloak looks pretty good there. As far as the brown up in here now, around the sash around her waist. Add a little shadow right in here. Okay, we're gonna build up some highlight here now on just below these armor plates here. Something you want to practice doing, Travis, when you're or Anthony, when you're painting, is it's kind of hard to explain. But when you're painting with a brush, the point of where you lift up the brush, in other words, where you stop your stroke and you're lifting the brush up from the surface, that's the point where there's going to be the most paint left behind on the model, or on the mini, or on the surface. So you want to make sure that your paint isn't too loaded when you're doing layering like this. Otherwise, you're going to create too strong of a transition, or too sharp of a transition, and people will be able to tell, that you're changing colors too drastically. Okay. And I don't think I'm going to go much lighter right there. It's the back of the model. There's a lot of shading from the pack she's got on her back there, so we'll probably stay right there. So there's the grays, there's the oranges, and there's the leather, and that all looks pretty darn good. I'm going to let this sit for a minute, and I want to talk about painting the face now. As I understand it, these Retribution elves have some pretty fair skin. So what I'm thinking as far as skin color goes is we want to keep that pretty light. So I'm thinking a base coat of Rindflesh is probably where we're going to go with that. And as far as the hair, I was actually thinking, Anthony, that we would do the hair blue, but a very, very light blue, white blue, like a frostbite color, and then we'll shade that down a little bit with some ink. And the reason why I'm thinking we go blue is because the contrast we're trying to create here is the contrast between orange and blue. So we want to work in the oranges using different shades of oranges to create that color, and then we want to work with the blues using different shades of blue to create that color. So the classic complementary orange, blue, hot and cold type scheme. So I also think too, giving her blue hair will help pull the blue color out that's in the gray armor, so that it's not so flat looking. I also think it'll complement the blue glowing effect that we'll create for the gems and the filigree on the armor plates. So I think both of those will work for you on that. Good, you're about some blue hair. I'm glad you like that. So for the base coat for the blue hair, we're going to go with Frostbite Blue, or Frostbite, P3 Frostbite. And you'll just use that to base the hair with. And I did prime this part of the model in white primer, whereas you'll recall I had used black primer, I believe it was black primer, as the base for the gray armor. You could probably do this over black primer without any issues, so I think you'll be okay. Frostbite's a good color. It has some good coverage. And it's so white, in fact, that you can't hardly see it on the camera. We're going to add some ink into this and fix that, though. So. Should actually be pretty easy, I'm thinking, to do with the hair what it is I've got in mind here. So alright, that's our initial base coat, so we'll let that dry for a moment and we'll do some skin tones now. And thinking about it here, looking at the Rin Flesh, the Rin Flesh is light, but it might be a little too light. So let's actually try mixing the Rin Flesh with a little bit of Menoth White highlight. Okay, and so we're going to end up having. Let's start fairly conservative, and for flesh tones, and this would be across the whole army, Anthony. Let's start with a base coat of about 2 parts Rin Flesh, 1 part Menoth White highlight. And just like we were doing with the leather color, I would recommend keeping the 2 colors separate on your palette for now, and mixing them individually, because we're going to create some different shades as we move along here. So 2 parts Rin Flesh, 1 part Menoth White highlight. That should give us a nice soft pink color. Looks good. A little more moisture to it. Great. And that's going to be our base coat for the flesh. This will probably take 2 or 3, at least 2 or 3 coats to give us a nice smooth finish. Try to avoid letting the paint pull in the deeper parts. Make sure to wipe that off there and don't let that happen. That gives you an uneven coat, and when you're trying to paint a nice smooth skin finish, you don't want the blotchiness that can create in the surface. You want to keep that paint really thin, or that surface really thin and even, excuse me. Okay, we're going to let that dry now for a bit, for a second. We'll come back to Syrah now. Move something over here so I've got a little more room to maneuver here. Okay, that's better. Okay. So let's come back to Issyra's the blue leggings that we did. I'm going to grab a little black now, Vallejo model color black. You can use Tharmar black though for this, that'll be just fine. And I'm just going to put a little bit of a dot of it on my wet palette, and we're just going to very roughly, in a very simple manner, just define the creases on these leggings. Just so we can start building that that illusion of shadow and depth on this surface. I usually don't like using straight black. You know, I like to add a little color to it sometimes. But this scheme is already so dark that I don't think we would be able to really convey black without using black, because there's just already so much gray in here. So that's why I'm opting to go with just regular straight black now. And after it dries, it blends in with the coal black really well. And while I'm waiting for the skin tone to dry there a little further, I'm just going to kind of add a little black line here on some of these armor plates just to define them a little more. That'll work for now. Okay, and we'll come back to the highlights on that and just on those leggings there in just a second. Okay, let me bring the face back over here. Got our first coat on there. It's looking mostly dry. Let's add a second coat. And this second coat may actually be enough. Okay. Okay. So for the shadow color, we want to keep the skin tones looking fairly soft, which means we want to be careful about how much contrast we put in there. But we need to have a darker color to start working the shadows with. So we're actually going to start with Beast Hide. And we're going to block in kind of the eyes. We're going to block in the mouth. We're going to block in the sides of the nose. We're going to block in the shadows on the ears. Maybe block in a little bit of a shadow underneath the cheeks. And we'll see how this color starts us off, and we may have to go a little darker before we're done. So when you start with these, working these shadows, don't worry too much about keeping the shadows even and smooth and blended and that type of thing, because we're not trying to do that right now. We're just trying to place where the shadows are going to be. We're going to come back with intermediate colors and glazes, and kind of soften those edges up and blend things together. So right now it's just about placing the shadows where you want them. Okay, and so as you can see, where I've placed the shadows are kind of in all the obvious spots. The eye sockets, on the sides of the nose, underneath the chin and neck, inside the ears, underneath the cheek there, and then also around the mouth. Let me just clean that up actually a little bit. She's got some really delicate features on her face here. Right under the nose too. You're going to want to place a little bit of a shadow under there. Okay. Now what we'll do is we'll take some of the beast hide and a little bit of the wren flesh, kind of mix the two colors together. You're going to get probably 1 to 1. You're going to get a color that's, I don't know, almost reminiscent of Cadoric flesh a little bit. So this is kind of a mid-tone color, all right? And you're going to kind of start working back from these shadows now. Don't cover the shadow completely, but work that edge there between the first shadow and kind of this initial, or this second shadow. A little sharp under the cheek there. I'm just going to soften that just a little bit there. Looks better. Same on this side here. And you notice I left our base color still showing through in some spots there. And I'm going to just do a little more work. Oh, the eyes are good. Just put a little bit of this at the top of the nose, right in the bridge there where the nose and the eyebrows meet. Now you want to take just straight wren flesh at this point and kind of soften the other side of that shadow, working up towards the highlights now, and kind of creating a softer transition between the shadows, that second shadow and the actual base coat color. You see how it's starting to come together now as the face. Just defining the chin a little bit more, the jawline there a little bit more. Okay, and that Those cheeks are still just a little strong. I'm going to pull this mid-tone back down, or back up into that shadow just a little further there. There's still enough of the original shadow color showing through, though, to still give that impression there of the shading. That softened it down. I might have to glaze a little more shadow into there, but that's fine. And then now we'll go back to our original base coat color of 2 parts Rin Flesh, 1 part Menoth White highlight. Add another part of Menoth White highlight to that now. And you want to focus on now the highlight areas. You can see how white, how bright that is. So highlight areas are going to be the tip of the nose. They're going to be the brow right above the eyes. Don't draw or don't paint a line all the way across the forehead there. Kind of leave the area in between the eyes with a little bit of shadow. You're also going to put this on the top of the cheeks. A little bit on the forehead right there. Come back on the tips and sides of the ear. Upper lip. The chin. It's looking fairly good. And just add a little more Menoth White highlight now to that mixture. And you just keep adding the Menoth White highlight, Anthony, until you get to the point that the shadows or the highlights are where you want it. Which I'm probably going to stop with her right here. A little bit on the cheek there. Okay. Now, a couple things here. As far as the lips go, let's take your Beast Hide color and take a drop of Umbral Umber and put it into about 2 drops of Beast Hide. Actually, that doesn't look good. Let's go 2 drops Umbral Umber, 2 drops Beast Hide. That should give you a fairly dark brown, at least dark for this skin color. And then you're going to paint a very fine line in between the lips. And then you can take your last highlight color and then you just want to put a dot right there in the center of the lower lips, just for a little bit of highlight there. And then go back to that brown color that you just mixed for the lips, the 1-to-1 ratio of Beast Hide and Umbral Umber, and let's define the eye sockets just a little bit more. Focusing that darker color on the underside of the eye socket. Now, for the actual eye color, I like to paint the Warcasters with glowing eyes, so we're going to put some of the frostbite down to actually represent her eyes. And this one has tiny, tiny eyes. Right, and that face is just about done. We will come back and enhance that glow effect here in just a minute, but what I want to do is go ahead and get the hair now on top of her head base coated in the frostbite. Okay. And I want to add a little warmth to her face. So what we're going to do, set that aside for a second, while we're waiting for the hair on top of the head to dry, we're going to add a little bit of warmth to the face, and to do that, we're going to take some brown ink. And you're going to want to thin this down quite a bit, Anthony, especially when you're working on faces. If you do too much at once, you're going to make your faces look like they're whores, like they have way too much rouge on. So it's best to start with just a little bit and build a layer of the red, the reddish hue that this brown gives, instead of just trying to do too much at once. So also make sure your brush is fairly dry isn't the right word, but you don't want it very loaded when you're doing this, because you don't want to leave any pooling behind anywhere. And this is an example of why you want to really make sure and have a smooth base coat. So you're going to take this brown ink and you're just going to kind of apply it right under the cheeks, pulling kind of back up towards the ear here, right where that shadow was. And this is just going to add a little bit of warmth to her face. It's not really going to clash with any of the colors that you've used so far, because it's so soft and mild. But it just also gives the face a little bit of life. Excuse me. It's a very fair complexion, and it's got a lot of cool temperatures going on here. And so we don't want her to look like a zombie or some kind of undead. So we just need to add that little touch of warmth in there. So where I'm focusing on is the cheeks, and I'm focusing on the area between the eyes. You could also glaze this over the lips a couple times, just to give those a little more life. And you can already see the difference that makes, and how that just gives a little more life to the face. Yeah, Anthony's in chat. He's asking, is the idea like you're almost putting a little bit of blush on the cheeks? Yes, but make sure to note where I was applying this. I wasn't applying it up here on top of the cheeks, because I don't want to destroy the highlight. I was applying it down here below where the shadow is, and kind of pulling that back towards the ear on both sides. Okay, if you get it too high, if you get this rosy color too high up on the cheeks, you start to get a clown look. It doesn't look natural. And this isn't necessarily a makeup thing that I'm doing here, where I'm making it look like she has makeup on. I'm using the warmth of the red to give life to the face. Let me see if I've got a mini around here somewhere that I was working on earlier, and I think I have it outside in the other shop. So I'm not going to be able to show it to you, but the bust, the 1/9 scale bust that I was painting of Saxon Oryx, if you look at his face, underneath the cheeks, around the eyes, around the bridge, I worked a little bit of red and pink into that flesh there, because I want to give that sense of life. I want to give that sense of warmth to the face. And if we put these two pieces next to each other, you can see that face really needs that for a couple of reasons. First, it's going to be a great focal point for the miniature. People are going to look at this mini and their eyes are going to go right to the face because of the very strong contrast between the dark armor and the very light face. And then with the blue that we're doing on the hair there, that cools things down a lot, and so we don't want it her to look like she's dead, like she's some kind of undead warcaster. So we need that warmth to come back in and warm things up just a little more. So, and I don't think I'm going to go much further on that. I think that's pretty good right there where it's at. Yeah, there you go. Thanks, Trevor. If you look on my profile picture on Twitch, that picture right there that you guys can see, that's the Saxon Oryx bust that I'm referring to, and you can see the warmth that I've put into the brow there, and the warmth that I've put into the cheeks, and that really helps add a sense of life to a face when you're doing it. So I like I like that comment, Anthony. That's pretty funny. She's going to look like a badass lady Sith. I like that. That's pretty cool, man. Very cool. So let's work now the blue hair. Okay, we base coated it in frostbite, and there is one little spot here that I do need to touch up. Just where the paint was showing, or the base coat was just showing through a little more. There you go. Okay. All right. So we've based in frostbite, and what we want to do now is start adding some blue shadows into the hair. And how we're going to do that is with blue ink. Okay. And same thing like with the brown that we just did. You don't want to apply the straight ink. You want to apply a watered down version of it. Okay. And also, we don't want to detract too much from the flowing nature of the hair, so we're going to keep the ink fairly centralized, kind of right into here, right into here, right into here, right around the hairpiece here, right around the hairpiece here, and then maybe work a little bit kind of right around the hairline. And then once we've got all those places inked, we're then going to add some highlights in with some white to really sell the effect. So you're probably going to do about a 1 to 3, 1 to 4, 1 to 5 ratio of ink to water. So for every drop of ink, you're going to want about 3 to 5 drops of water. And as you start working with it, you'll see if you need to go lighter or darker. You also want to make sure and keep the brush not very loaded, and keep a second brush handy that you're going to use to kind of soft blend the edges. And this is what you'll do. You'll just take the blue ink and you're just going to pull it into those the hair strands that are already modeled onto the mini. And I'm just using a second brush to quickly kind of soften it and spread it about. Almost like two brush blending, but with inks instead. Okay, and you see how that first set of shadows kind of looks there, where I was placing it, how I was focusing it. Alright, and that's about as far as you want to go with that. You don't want to really push that too far because you don't want the hair to look blue. You want to make the hair look more like it's white with blue shadows, if that makes sense. You got a question up in chat. Let me see. Is the second brush you're using to soften the blends most like with a two brush blend? Yes, that's exactly what it's for. You have to move quickly because ink can dry fast. But yeah, you're gonna kind of roughly mark where you want your ink to go, and then use your other brush, soften that out. Let's move on now to some of these spots further down the hair. And I'm going to thin my ink out just a little more, because I'm going to be working over larger areas, so I don't want it to dry too quickly. Let's start here at the bottom. I'm just going to kind of glaze these areas in, and then pull some of these places where it's puddling a little bit out. You don't want it to puddle. Okay, you don't want it to form puddles deep in the cracks, otherwise you're going to get some nasty bathtub type rings. For those of you that have seen my chromac that I've painted for my circle army, this is very similar to how I did his hair. Keep your ink pretty concentrated near this hairpiece here, because that's where some of the shadow is going to be the strongest, or some of the texture in the hair is going to be the strongest. Another thing you might be able to do too, Anthony, is if you can find a wash, like Secret Weapon Miniatures washes, you might be able to find a blue one that you can dilute down and get the same effect with, or a similar effect with. Okay. So you can see that building, and we don't want to go too much contrast with it. Now we want to take some Mora white. And you're going to want this to be fairly, you don't want to use it straight out of the bottle. Make sure you're thinned down just a little bit. You know, probably 3 drops of paint to 1 drop water, 4 drops paint to one drop water, something like that. Make sure your brush also is not too loaded. And now what you want to do is kind of define some of the highlights. And this is what's going to really sell the white hair effect, is how well you place these and how clean they look. And there you go, you can already see that starting to take effect there. And for the hair here, I'm just kind of using the side of the brush, pulling it down the ridges of the hair, and kind of letting the high points pick up the white. Get just a little more white on my brush here. All right. And that face is pretty darn close to done, other than just a couple other details that we have to pick up with the metal hairband there, and then also with the eyes, creating the OSL glowing effect. We'll have to cover that next time. I was actually hoping to finish her tonight, but I took a little longer on the face, but that's okay. That's my choice. You know what I'm going to do too? This is going to bother me. I'm just going to add a little bit more painting ADD at its finest right here, guys. I'm just going to add a little more red, the brown ink around the lips here. That's better. Okay. All right. So we're going to go and wrap her up tonight. Next week, or over the next few days, if I get a chance to broadcast outside of my normal times, I'll finish up the gems, and we're going to finish up this back pack here, and then get the head mounted. In fact, next time you see her, probably I will have the head mounted. So the last thing to finish up is just going to be the gems, and then the OSL effect that will do, the quick one that we'll do there. So that's about it for tonight, Anthony. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to email me. For you guys that are going to stick around and chat, I'm going to take a quick 5-minute break, reset my wet palette, reset my workstation here for some work on Death Jack, and we're going to move to him tonight. So next, make sure to stick around for the next 5 minutes. And Anthony, I will send you an email later tomorrow. And for the rest of you guys, thanks for watching, and have a good night. If you have any questions in general about these PaintCast videos, feel free to email me at redmodeling@gmail.com, or you can pick me up on Facebook at facebook.com/redmodelingpaint. For the rest of you guys, have a good night, and we'll talk with you later. Thanks a lot.